Chapter 3. Jack sat down at the rickety table his grandfather had built. The princess glanced at the tables of her chair, then pointedly took a seat farther away on one of the tiny beds. Apparently she wanted some distance, something she wasn't going to get much of in this cramped cottage. With a table, 2 beds, a chest of drawers, and a fireplace for cooking, there just wasn't room for distance. Okay, let's get on with this, Jack said, opening the large book on the table to the marked page. Only it wasn't the page he'd been expecting. Text filled the left page, while on the right, "What's that?" Mai asked, coming over to stand behind him. She pointed at the elaborate illustrations of a man holding the golden heart, facing down a rampaging giant. "Nothing," Jack said, quickly flipping to the first blank page. "Apparently my grandfather's been reliving the past." "Did he draw that?" Mai asked. "Nope," Jack said. "It's a storybook. It's actually pretty rare. There were only 4 made. My grandfather got this one when he rescued an old woman who used to ride a giant goose." He flipped to the very front of the book and pointed to the picture of his teenage grandfather creeping through a dungeon to free an imprisoned woman and a very annoyed-looking goose. "Anyway, the book writes down any stories you tell it, painting whatever you're thinking as pictures. It's not only a good way to keep track of them, but it fills in some blanks that most people leave out." "So what, it will record it?" Mai asked, raising an eyebrow. "So not only do you have fairies and stuff, you also have magic voice recognition books? Weird." At the mention of her, the fairy in Jack's hair perked up, spread her wings, and gently flew over to Mai's hand. The princess's eyes went wide, but she held up her palm for the fairy to land on, staring at the creature with wonder. The fairy, though, just smiled, then climbed up Mai's arm and into her hair, burying into it and sighing contentedly. "That might have been the cutest thing I've ever seen," Mai said. The fairy waved a bit in response, then settled back to fall asleep. "I guess you don't need technology when you've got fairies, huh?" Mai said, then seemed to realize something. "Speaking of technology," she reached into the front pocket and pulled out the small, fat card with numbers on it, some of which she pushed a few times. When nothing happened, she frowned and slipped the card back into her pocket. "I figured there wouldn't be a signal, but it would have made things a lot easier." "Well, yeah," Jack said. We don't get a lot of signals out here. Not anymore. We used to, but they all died, eaten by monsters. It wasn't a good situation." Mai nodded slowly at him. "Sounds pretty bad," she said, turning back to the book. "So what, I just have to start talking?" and it'll write down what I say. Try it, Jack said, flipping back to the blank page. Well, I was up later than I was supposed to be, so I had all my lights off, May said. And then she stopped as text began to appear in the storybook. Once upon a time, it read, a beautiful young girl disobeyed her grandmother. On the opposite page, an illustration appeared, showing May in a dark room, her face lit blue by some kind of glowing square. That's so creepy, she said. I didn't even say I was on my computer. It takes both what you say and what you think, princess, Jack said, ignoring the fact that he had no idea what a computer was. And don't think I didn't see the part about calling yourself beautiful. It's a smart book, May said, the corners of her mouth rising a bit. Alright then. I was up late when I heard Grandma coming upstairs, so I quickly turned off my computer and jumped into bed. The text rose to the surface of the storybook's page as May talked. But Jack soon forgot it. As he always did when someone was telling a story, the illustrations were so realistic, it was hard not to stare at them. Grandma knocked and came into my room, she said, and a new illustration appeared, a woman silhouetted in the doorway, light spilling in behind her. That's my grandma, May said, her voice catching a bit. If she was, the woman certainly didn't look the right age. Her face was perfect and beautiful and unmarred by any worry or smile lines. Her long black hair was tied up in a bun, though Jack could make out a white streak or two playing in and out of the hair. Despite May's protests about not being a princess, this woman clearly had a royal bearing. In fact, she reminded Jack of nothing less than a queen, even in what looked to be a simple dressing gown. Wow, Jack blurted out. Yeah, May said, kinda intimidating, but you get used to it. She told me I had to get up, but she sounded worried. She said that someone had broken into the house, that they had stolen something. A box she'd always had, a box with a "O" on it. An illustration appeared of a wooden box with a heart on its front. Jack couldn't tell much else about it, since most of the box was obscured beneath the pile of books, clothes, and other items he didn't recognize. She never let me near that box, May said. It was always hidden away somewhere. The only time I ever saw it was when we'd move, which we did a lot. So this box, it was stolen? Jack asked. That's all she said was taken, May said. Not sure why someone would just steal that and not take any of our valuables. She told me it wasn't safe though, At the time, I thought she just meant because someone had been in our house. And they could come back anytime, you know. It made sense. So she told me to get up, that we were leaving. Oh, and she handed me a note with emergency numbers on it and told me to call them if anything happened. Numbers? Jack asked. She frowned. Yeah, kinda useless though, considering my phone doesn't work. Jack nodded, pretending he understood any part of what she just said. She wanted to leave right then, so I quickly got dressed and followed her out, she said, glancing at the illustration forming on the page. Or at least I started to. A picture slowly formed of a room more richly furnished than any Jack had ever seen. An enormous bed covered in linens filled most of the room. Right next to the lodge with a desk that May's glowing square sat on. The walls were some kind of smooth, uninterrupted stone, white as clouds. All but one small part, that was. Though the May in the picture seemed oblivious to it. A small, familiar blue flame burned on the wall right behind her. And inside the blue flame, Jack leaned closer to look. Inside the flame was a small hand, like that of a child. The hand was reaching for May. See, May said sadly, this is where they come for me.